Pranakasha live stream. Hey folks, it's Matt at Pranakasha Productions, and today we are talking with Nikolas Caoile, very well-known, super talented conductor in the Seattle area and also in Eastern Washington. So I'm looking at Nick's website so I can see all the stuff, but I know you as a great conductor, also very capable pianist and percussionist. And then I think also you're also a composer too, right?
That was where how I did my undergrad. I was a composition major, and that was mostly because I didn't want to be a pre-med major. And it was the only major available to me that was not performance in the music area.
Okay.
I'm pretty good friends with the composition professor at Willamette University. His name was John Peel.
Okay.
He was a 12-tone serialist. And he and I just loved that kind of music, loved Alban Berg, Schoenberg, Stockhausen, Boulez, and we just played with 12 tones.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Then do you have any compositions from that era that you're proud of or that you've performed anywhere?
Yeah, I have a piano trio that still exists here in my library.
Okay.
That is serial on all levels, pitch, rhythm, dynamic.
Whoa. Yes. Okay. Well, I don't know. Okay, we're already off on a huge tangent, but so,
yes.
So I mean, the thing about serialism, at least from what I know about Schoenberg, was the idea was that you would just completely divorce yourself from any kind of musical instincts that were built into how you were born or grown up or whatever society you're in, and you just go straight intellectualism, mathematical formulas, and all that stuff.
Well, to be fair, they felt like the lineage was Bach,
okay,
to Beethoven, Brahms,
okay,
to the chromaticism of Strauss, Wagner.
Okay.
And there was no way to go further than to go to. He had to go to 12 tones as a lineage from Bach to Schoenberg.
Okay, so I mean, it sounds awfully ideological to me.
Yes.
Right. So they just took that to an extreme. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if you go to like Bach, Slater, Fugue, some of those are totally chromatic.
Yes, I mean,
it just slides right down,
And they have cited that in some of those fugues began with 12 tones first before it went into a very tonal construct.
Right.
But Schoenberg is one of those guys that actually thought that God was speaking through him.
Through pure intellect.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like Plato, possibly.
Yes. Well, he called it the emancipation of the dissonance, that he is actually freeing the dissonance.
Right. But it seems like that never really happened.
Yeah. Well, it never caught on, but as a result of going so extreme this way,
right?
Other composers like John Adams and Philip Glass, and the spiritual minimalists had a voice.
Arvo
Pärt, yes.
Pärt, sorry.
Exactly. Yeah.
He has that famous piece that's all basically the white keys, He has a lot of pieces like that, but there's a special one that everybody loves that it's basically C major through the whole thing.
Yes.
And
that's actually what we're finding now, is that everyone's returning to that more tonal construct.
Yeah.
But had Schoenberg and his colleagues not gone that far out, maybe we wouldn't have discovered that this is the music we actually love.
Okay, I'll buy that. Okay, so then how long did it take you to come to that realization? Like, were you already there when you were writing pure serial music, or?
I wasn't there. I took up the composition degree not to become a composer per se.
Okay.
But to study music, to study how it was constructed, to study form, to study styles and devices. So I never really intended to go into composition. I did want to be a conductor by that point.
Okay. So you were just mostly doing it because that's the degree you were getting, so you had to kind of play the game, sort of?
Well, in the United States, there is no, and actually in most countries, there is no undergraduate conducting degree. So you get a bachelor's in, most people do a performance degree on their principal instrument. I wasn't good enough as a pianist to do that, or as a percussionist to do that. So I decided to go with composition. And then you can enter into some sort of master's program or doctoral program in conducting.
Okay, I find that hard to believe that you wouldn't be able to get a bachelor's degree in piano performance, because I've heard you play.
Yeah, I think I was a late bloomer. I mean, I played well. I didn't play like these machines that just play everything pitch perfect and super fast. I mean, I played well. I think I was a decent musician.
Okay,
but I didn't play like the machines. So, I didn't think I was capable of earning a degree the way I played at that point. I certainly think I blossomed now as a pianist.
Okay. So at the time, like, you couldn't play piano concertos or something like that, or some of the big chamber music pieces or stuff?
No, I couldn't play the Chopin etudes or the Liszt Transcendental etudes, or the big pieces that everyone plays, the Bach preludes and fugues. But I could sight read very, very well. So I was deployed as an accompanist.
Okay.
In my bachelor's, and I was very successful that way. So I was just very, very good at faking it, reducing the score, etc.
So there's not. Maybe there is now. I thought now you can get a degree in accompanying at some schools. Is that true?
That is true. And if you back up one more step, I chose Willamette because I wanted to be a doctor.
Okay. Like a medical doctor.
Yes, I chose it for the pre-med program.
Okay.
And that was my route. And then at Willamette, I decided music was more my choice.
Okay. Wow. Okay. And then that was your route into conducting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's go to where we are now. So now do you have any interest in composing these days, if you had the time?
No, well, I still have that keen interest in what a composer does and how they see music and how they construct music. But I'm not even interested in composition or arranging of that kind. I feel like that's an art in itself. These people that are in Hollywood that are, taking the melodies by John Williams and then creating and orchestrating and arranging. I'm not interested in that. I mean, learning scores as a conductor is enough work.
Yeah. Well, especially you're one of the conductors who really learns to score well, So, okay. All right. So that's basically your thing. You really are. I mean, so conducting is your calling. Yeah.
And where some conductors would just, would learn scores to see how they manage the pace and manage 3s and 4s and 2s. Mm-hmm. As you saw, that I'm really curious about the inner workings of it, so much that I can memorize a score and do it without something in front of me.
Right. And then you also, I know just playing in, like, Union Civic Orchestra is one of the orchestras you conduct now, and I play in it. And I know, like, when you're conducting, like, you've got, especially the percussion parts and everything, you're trying to hear in your mind everything that's going on. Right.
Exactly. And that's what I teach my conducting students here, just as an actor might memorize a script and do it and embody that character, embody the motivation of that subject. Same thing for me. I feel like I'm a conductor that should embody the style, the weight, the affect, the character of a score, so much so that I'm actually that score.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something. Wow. And you also, for a while, I don't know if you still are, but for a while, weren't you like in an administrative role at Central?
Yes. These things kind of fall into your lap. You never seek this kind of stuff out. Yeah. But I served as the chair, actually the acting chair of the department for 2 years, 2017 and 2018.
Oh, okay. So now that was a while ago now.
Yeah.
So that you just sort of did it because they asked you to, or did you have any ambitions to go that route at all?
There was a lineage there. Our chair at that time decided to go up to the dean position for an interim spot. And when he decided to take that, he pulled me aside because he already knew that I had some of this administrative skill. Said, why don't you become the interim chair? And so I did it for 2 years, and it's an amazing experience to see the administrative side of how academe works. From the faculty side, is about students. It's about thinking. It's about innovation. It's about making progress in your discipline. And on the administrative side, as you might imagine, it's about dollars and cents,
fundraising.
It's about fundraising. It's really about bottom line. I don't think we even we looked at a lot of spreadsheets the whole time.
Fun. Yeah. Well, of course, that since you have some community orchestras, you sort of know what that's like from that perspective too, right?
Yeah, in community orchestras versus professional orchestras, you're not dealing with the same kind of payroll that a professional orchestra is looking at.
Okay, that's true. So I guess in a professional orchestra, you've got like these really heavy hitter donors that you got to keep happy and all that. Where in something like Luco, it's more kind of a grassroots type of a thing.
And then you also, let's say the Seattle Symphony, you're talking about 60 to 70 musicians that are under contract that are making their primary income from that orchestra. So you shut down for a COVID, you shut down for whatever reason, those people are out.
Right. And they have their own guild or union or whatever. Mm-hmm. So there's all kinds of things that you get to deal with that too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, okay. So you've got I think do you have 3 different orchestras right now that are basically you're in charge of? Is that true?
I'm working with the Lake Union Civic Orchestra, as you said. I'm also been the music director of the Wenatchee Valley Symphony Orchestra since 2010. And then
okay.
I've been here at Central Washington University. This will be year 17.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're actually in your office at Central right now.
This is my office. Yeah. Cool. I've been in this exact office for 17 years.
Wow. So would you say that you've arrived as far as your career goes, or do you still have greater goals that you want to achieve?
I think that's probably one thing that's unique about me is that I'm constantly looking at other challenges. Uh-huh. So here at CWU, I think we've been recognized at the local level, the state level, regional and international level. So I feel like we've kind of reached some acclaim. At Wenatchee, we've done some amazing things. At Luco, we're just getting started. I kind of started during a pandemic season period, so we're just getting started there. But I have all kinds of missions now. I mean, the world's changed so much. It's not Beethoven and Brahms anymore. I think there's, things are changing when it comes to the classical music world. Okay. I think for the better. So
I notice, you like to have pretty diverse programs, and we have all kinds of different types we have the meat and potatoes, the Beethoven and Brahms and standard repertoire, but then we throw in least from Luco's point of view, then we throw in some other, a lot more obscure composers, so it keeps it really interesting. So how do you go out when you're do you find yourself wanting to premiere new stuff, or do you already kind of have, your go-to compositions?
It's not like I go out there and seek out, okay, I need a new composition. Let's seek that out right now. Actually, I begin, and especially during the pandemic, because composers were, because it didn't have a connection to a performing group. Everyone was in their homes. They were performing on their own in their homes and giving away their music for free. So I have this kind of, especially being a student of composition, I have this thought, and I think it's true that there are Mozarts and Beethovens and Brahms living amongst us right now. They don't have the king or the patron or they just need to be discovered. And so I follow a lot of these composers, and I'm fascinated with their perspective on music and what they do with the orchestra. And, I throw them on programs I think are useful, or that would be impactful, or are a foil to something else that's already on the program, like a Beethoven or a Brahms. And much in the way that a chef might put, something new, an amuse-bouche on a 5-course dinner, right next to something that the patron might expect. So I think that's actually really, really important, that someone smells and tastes and hears and sees something that they didn't expect.
Right. Yeah.
But these composers are right around us, and they are actually quite talented.
Yeah, there's so many great composers, especially nowadays. Now that we have like Finale and Sibelius and stuff, it really helps to be able to orchestrate, and so, and then just because it's technology, there's just, there's a Facebook group I have that I started by accident several years ago that now has like 15,000 composers in it. Like there's no way I could ever sift through there and listen to everybody's music, obviously. But there's just so much good stuff out there and so many talented people. Yeah.
As a composer, that your product, your creation kind of exists on paper until someone brings it to life. Right.
And I think that's something that, I don't know if they teach it so much nowadays, but I think like in composition classes, they should really hammer that home with the students, is that when you're composing your piece, you should already be campaigning with whatever musicians to get the first performance happening, Yes. And you should be working with them and, have the space in mind where it's going to be performed, and just have the whole thing becoming real as you're composing it.
And that's a lesson from, even Bach, Beethoven, and Mozart, they had the performers in mind as they were composing these pieces. As the same as a composer today should have their performers in mind, so they know that's going to not disappear in the ether, that it actually going to get some sort of play.
Yeah. And then, that's the best way to do it. Of course, the crazy thing is, you put all this time into your piece, right? And then what seems to be the reality is then you're not going to get paid for it. In fact, a lot of times you have to put up the money to to pay the people who are going to perform it. So the whole thing is not a very money-making thing. It's more like a money sink, sort of like having a boat, for people who have boats. But
yes,
that just seems to be the reality, unless you're one of the very, very few that have become recognized enough that you can actually get a commission
Yes.
or sell your piece or whatever it is, and make some royalties off it.
And yeah, if you look at history, the composers who are attached to a star, soprano or pianist or violinist, who are attached to a star librettist or a conductor, once they have that partnership, that's actually how, I mean, if I could teach a new class here at CW, it would have to do about entrepreneurship and how to market. Because we spend so much of our time on the skill, on the craft, on being a better performer, on being a better composer. But how do we become a better business person?
Marketer, so. Yeah, especially nowadays with social media. I mean, that's pretty much what everybody has to do. Even like pretty well-known actors, they got to be out there, you know, doing their TikTok and their Facebook and Twitter and whatever so that they can get their next gig, you know.
And that in itself is an art, controlling your image online.
Yeah. Yeah, or just being out there, however you're going to do it.
Right.
Yeah. It's okay, so I just lost what I was trying to say. Well, so for the entrepreneurship part, like what would your advice be for like a freshman that's coming in and they want to be a composer and they want to, let's say they want to do video game music or something like that. Like, how would they do it?
Yeah, I mean, the reality today is that we're in touch with the entire world.
Okay.
So you're not trying to control your local reach and then eventually become popular and then your state reach and beyond that. It's like you can reach someone right now in Africa or in Russia with your own online thing. So you have to come up with a plan about how you create a profile of yourself, how you release your stuff, how you respond to critics, how you respond to people that want to get your music. And at the same time, controlling your other your personal digital footprint. So if you become controversial in a political way or can become controversial in a musical way, that actually might hurt you in the long run.
Right. Or help, depending on how you do it. Of course, I think if you're like in your case, since you have an academic post, you have to be a little more non-controversial, I would think, because you have sort of your academic reputation that you got to uphold.
Right.
So, as opposed to someone who's just who's an artist. I mean, like, for example, let's go to like Van Halen. Okay, they're talking the 80s, but I mean, they did the opposite where they completely amped up their image to be way over the top, way beyond how they really were in real life, you know? And and they didn't really have to do that because they were already, at least Eddie Van Halen and his brother were super talented. And David Lee Roth in the studio did some amazing vocal stuff. Apparently it wasn't that great live, but, but anyways, I mean, so they created an image and they went way beyond. They wanted to they literally turned it into like a circus show, you know, and that became their thing. And obviously they were super controversial. You know, they did all kinds of crazy stuff that none of them could ever be professors at some university, at least during that time. So it's an interesting thing.
Yes, I think becoming a spectacle is a way to jumpstart someone's career. I mean, it generates views, it generates conversation, it generates
buzz, let's say.
Buzz, exactly. Yeah. But as a result, you know, you could be trading in your personal integrity. And if people want to buy a product that's not really you, that's just a spectacle, you kind of have to keep on riding that wagon until, you know, it's because it pays off. Yeah.
It's interesting though. Like, okay, I could think of like Franz Liszt, for example.
Yeah.
He sort of lived that thing. And of course he could do amazing things on the piano.
Yes.
You know? And he totally, you know, that was his career. Maybe even Paganini was the same way, you know.
Yes.
There's all these legends about he made a deal with the devil, and that's how he could play, and I'm sure he made that up, And then once it caught on, he just kept it going.
Yes.
Things like that. Showmanship, I guess. I
think one of the things we see today that kind of just like creates a buzz is young people doing amazing things. So a 5-year-old playing Mozart, or 11-year-old playing Rachmaninoff piano concerto. That's just like buzz. Mm-hmm. And these young people, many of them are just not ready for that kind of stardom.
Right. Yeah.
Ready for that kind of travel. Ready for that kind of scrutiny. So, on the one hand, it's amazing for audiences, but on the other hand, it could destroy these kids' lives.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's go. Mozart, of course, was a wonder kid.
Yes.
You probably read Mozart's letters, right? Have you read those?
Yes.
That's like the most fascinating book I ever read, because you literally get inside of Mozart's head, and you get to see life through his eyes. And but he had all this ability, plus his dad was like the number one teacher in Europe. And yet they were always campaigning to try to get him a job. And then finally, the kind of job he was trying to get was that an organist, he always had a side gig, to try to pay the bills. And then he was hatching all these plans about, I remember parts where he was like, well, I really need the money, and I got this new concert set up, and I'm going to sell tickets, and then I need investors to help front me the money to sell the tickets. But then he was always doing schemes like that.
Yes.
Also, another thing that really stuck in my head was he was complaining about how like the lead tenor and soprano in his opera, is probably Marriage of Figaro or something like that, were getting paid like 10 times as much as he was, even though he was the composer. Yes. So it's the same thing, same type of stuff that happens now. He was dealing with right then.
Mm-hmm.
So. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of his stardom is the responsibility of his dad, right. Much the same way that Michael Jackson's parents, pushed him, or Serena and Venus Williams' dad pushed them, because they saw talent in them early. And some kids can withstand that and some kids can't.
Yeah. I think something's changed, though, because what I see now, because of social media, now we have the situation where there's a lot of artists, a lot of actors and things that they're able to have their on-screen persona, and then they're able to have their TikTok and their Instagram where they just act like a normal person and they can just be themselves. And everybody's able to quickly switch between the two. And in fact, a lot of people become greater fans because they get to just see this person as a normal person,
Yes.
And I think that's kind of a new development in the past decade or so.
Yes.
So this idea that you have to always create a persona and maintain it is kind of falling away. So what do you say to that?
I mean, I love that part, because we only see in the classical world, we only see these artists in their dresses, in their tuxedos, performing in concert. It's kind of nice to see them in their, street clothes, or, in their homes, making cakes, or even doing something other than classical music. They're playing with their pets, or they're, cooking dinner. We saw a lot of that in the pandemic, which is
right.
Really
like I know Itzhak Perlman was doing these regular updates where he would just be like in his living room playing a piece and talking about it, whatever, and just being your friendly guy, and he would tell stories,
Yeah.
He's really good at telling stories. And Yo-Yo Ma would do that, and everybody's doing it. Another one that comes to my mind is Katie Sakhoff. Oh. First time I ever really knew of her as an actor was when she played Starbuck in the reboot of Battlestar Galactica. And in that, she plays a really tough chick, warrior, hard-nosed, type of person. So I always thought of her as that, until I started watching her YouTube channel. And she's hanging out with Michelle Heffer, who also was in Battlestar Galactica. And they're just goofing around, acting silly and just being silly and hilariously funny. And to tell you the truth, that's when I kind of fell in love with her. I was like, wow, I really love Katie Sakhoff. She's so cool. And that was from watching her YouTube channel. That wasn't from watching her on Battlestar Galactica.
Nice.
So, because she was just being real, and it turned out her real personality was really adorable and just hilarious.
Right.
So, that seems to be like the thing that really works nowadays, is able to just be yourself, and then
Hillary Hahn's done a lot of that lately, where she just posts 30-second videos of her practicing and making mistakes.
Okay.
Everyone knows her to be just pitch perfect.
Right?
And she's practicing Dvorak or practicing Tchaikovsky and learning. And the students here at CWU have actually appreciated her videos, because she actually practices.
She makes mistakes. She's a real person.
Yes.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, I think the cool thing is you can do both. Like, you're just switching roles, when you're on stage and you're like, okay, I want to play this as well as I can. Then you're just,
yes,
that's who you are. But then once you're off stage, you can switch back to being a normal person who has to take a shower and brush their teeth and mow the lawn or whatever, pick up the clothes off their floor.
I think professional athletes have appreciated this too. They're always on the court or the field, and everyone's cheering for them. But I think they enjoy showing the softer side. When they're not competitive, they're just playing with their kids, or being themselves.
Yeah. And these days, because the way it used to be with TV, you only had so much time, and you had advertisers that were paying to advertise in your little 20-minute show or whatever, and you couldn't do things like that. But now we can just put on, like this show, we can just ramble for an hour and a half, about whatever, and people dig it because we're not really putting on a show. We're just sort of a couple of guys talking,
Exactly.
So I like that. I think also, even before YouTube really hit, there was also this big thing about on TV. Remember, there was that stage where there were just tons of reality shows. Once America's Funniest Home Videos became a huge hit, suddenly all the sitcoms were disappearing and everything was a reality show,
Right.
Sort of unscripted or just sort of moderately scripted type of stuff.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Go ahead.
So, like, for you, well, let me just ask you this: like, what's the biggest thing on your mind right now?
I have some concerns about the classical music world, and what happened with it during the pandemic, and where it's going to fit back into our society. I think. As the classical music world was hit pretty hard during the pandemic. Live performances wasn't there, and some orchestras folded as a result. Mm-hmm. So, and to struggle to survive, orchestras had to play the hits. Mm-hmm. So I struggle with that. At the same time, I also want to highlight new music by living composers, music by Black, Asian, female composers. How do we keep both of those going while at the same time keeping music alive? That's on my mind. And when I'm a conductor, when I'm playing piano, and then also when I'm teaching students here at CWU, it's like, how are these guys going to keep art music alive?
Okay. So from what like the audience numbers and stuff are still down quite a bit.
Yeah, it's always been down. I don't think it's dramatically down like so many people think. But when you compare it to live sports, when you compare it to pop music, when you compare it to even like superstar restaurants. We're just not getting that kind of noise. You see businesses like Nike, Marriott, Patagonia, their Walmart, their mind is on, on social media, on like being in your face and being relevant in this world. And I think classical music can actually learn something from those realms.
Okay. But of course, I mean, we've got this, you've probably seen, what do you call it? A crowd, whatever. It's when like, it's called, you know what it is. It's like, there's all these videos where people just sort of gather and start playing. What's that called?
Yes. Pop-up or,
it's not a pop-up, but whatever. There's that really famous one where I think it was the Berlin Philharmonic started doing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony.
Yes.
Starting with one musician and then another and another. And then like that became a really popular video. So we do have stuff like that. That's really innovative.
Yes. And I think we need to do more of that kind of stuff and taking the music outside the concert hall, mixing popular music with classical music.
Yeah.
Not playing in a church, so this doesn't feel so, or in a concert hall, or in a different setting, so it doesn't feel so formal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, also, I mean, we also have this idea of kind of giving lectures along with the concert, or even just a quick talk in between pieces, just to kind of prime everybody and let them know, get them into like the mindset of what was going on at the time the composer wrote it or something like that. That's really useful. Yeah.
Crowds react to a slam dunk or a touchdown or, a beautiful steak, those kinds of things. It's kind of, classical music is less of a spectator sport than it is these other things. So I'd love for us to have a bit more of an audience engagement, maybe flashing some photos on behind the orchestra, something that has a little bit more of a bang or a little bit more of an engagement for a classical music audience.
Right. To make it more real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, I mean, in opera, it kind of gets more like that in certain opera houses. Yeah, people are like, they'll cheer right after the aria if the singer does really well and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I love that. There's the famous aria, or there's a famous soprano or tenor, and they just cheer for those people. If there's a moment in Beethoven 5 or a moment in Death and Transfiguration, it's not like people are allowed to just cheer. It's kind of shunned,
Right. Yeah. You get in trouble if you even clap between movements.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's something.
I have this fantasy of, players actually twittering in the meeting, in the middle of the piece saying, nailed that solo, or, that was amazing. The conductor just took that too fast, or something that just like gets people engaged in what's going on live.
Okay. Well, if they ever start implanting chips in people's brains, you could probably do that because you can just think it and go right out on the internet.
I mean, you see that in professional sports, after a game's done, it's like, wow, I just surpassed Roger Federer for the most wins, wow, what an amazing game, or what an amazing three-pointer, those kinds of things.
Okay, yeah, that's possible. Yeah, well, you could probably get soloists to do that, like right after. Well, they do sometimes they'll do that. They'll on shows, you'll have an intermission. During the intermission, you'll talk to one of the soloists or something before and after. They've done stuff like that. But you could probably get soloists. The younger soloists for sure would do like a little tweet or an Instagram as they're putting their violin away or their cello or their trombone,
Yeah, it's often like a selfie with a conductor after a performance, nailed Tchaikovsky, or, you know, beautiful Brahms with Luco. But those tend to be very static. It's just a photo. It's not like something that has motion to it, a video or an excerpt of what we're playing, those kinds of things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Just different ways to get people more engaged and to show, even a superstar, most of them are willing to show how they got there and how much work it took and who their models were, who taught them and who they were looking up to and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all. Because it's way more available now because of YouTube.
That's right.
Interestingly enough, I was supposed to go to bed early yesterday, and then I got hooked in to this Adam Savage video. He's from Mythbusters.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like his day off, and he was in his own shop. It was just a homemade video. Basically, he turned his phone on and started talking to it. And he's like, I've got 8 hours today, and my schedule's clear, so I'm going to make myself a lightsaber. So he took this big piece of aluminum, it was 2.5-inch aluminum cylinder. He's like, this is what I'm going to use. I already drew the picture, and I'm going to turn this piece of aluminum into this picture using that lathe and that milling machine over there. And it was an 1.5-hour video, and I watched the entire thing.
Nice.
It was so fascinating because it also reminded me of when I was in metal shop back in 9th grade. Surprisingly, that became like one of my favorite classes in high school. Nice. It's metal shop, and I had no idea what metal shop was on the first day of the class, but the teacher was so good and everything, I just got totally into it. So watching this guy take a piece of raw metal and then start machining it on the lathe and all that. And the interesting thing with Adam Savage is he had a general plan and he had sketches and stuff. But he also would pivot sometimes halfway through the process where it's like, I just don't really like this like that. Let's try something else. And then he would try, and a couple of times he would fail and he'd have to throw it out and try again. And that would be like 4 hours worth of work down the drain. But it's just so funny. It's great to watch him because on one hand, he's super skilled at what he does, and he has an engineer type of brain that knows all the details and every little tiny little millionth of an inch that it's got to be machined to for it to fit.
Mm-hmm.
But he also has the creative part of his brain where like, I want this to look different, this lightsaber. I want to put this little doohickey on it because I think it'll look cool.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff is so fascinating again to me. And that was just, you totally got in his world, which was, working with machinery and making props,
And there's probably thousands of people just like you that are fascinated and enjoy seeing the behind the scenes work of, an expert in their field.
Yeah.
And it's like inspiration in the moment. They're taking a right turn, then a left turn, and a right turn and a left turn. I think classical music audiences would love to see how we do a rehearsal, how someone practices. All those things, I think, are ways to open up the classical music world.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Yeah. Well, one thing I wish would come back in the classical world, at least as far as concertos go, I wish that the tradition of putting a cadenza in a concerto would return to that the performer was expected to write their own cadenza or just make it up on the spot right there, because that's what it really was, and then somehow it around Mendelssohn's time, the composers started providing their own cadenzas, and then pretty soon it was always the composer put the cadenza in if there was one at all. And so that I thought that's a shame, because then you took out the one chance where the performer would actually also be the creator of the music in that moment. So
Yeah, we're so concerned today about like perfect performances and recordings, and we forget that Bach and Mozart, Beethoven, they were improvisers.
Yeah.
Bach probably did that every Sunday, just made something up on the spot. Mozart was making stuff on the spot. That's another part of musical training that I think we're missing is the ability to improvise and make things up on the spot.
Yeah, especially for classical. I mean, like if you're a jazz musician, it's just assumed that you learn how to do that.
That's right.
And now it's become like a science. There's all these techniques. I mean, people write treatises about how to improvise, and there's all these tricks you can do besides just winging it,
Right.
And from my point of view, I think a lot of the really good improvisers, it's basically just the same techniques that you would use as a composer. It's just that you got to do it in the moment, but it can be done. You learn how to do it, and you can, there's all kinds of tricks. Like I like to, when I'm playing in church and we do a hymn, I like to just make up the descants right off the bat.
Nice.
And a simple thing you can do, you can just do an echo effect.
Yes.
Where you just repeat what you just heard, maybe a beat or two after, and there's dissonances, but they'll resolve. And sometimes you have to fudge to get it to work, but most of the time it will make musical sense. So there's a real quick trick right there.
Totally.
And then you can do things like if you throw out some motif and you do it once, then just do it again a few times. A few bars later, and then suddenly you've created a structure that it's improvised, but it all makes musical sense. There's things like that you can do. You just kind of have to think on multiple levels. You're playing notes, right? And then another part of your brain is up here, kind of architecting where you're trying to go with it. But I mean, that was something that all the great jazz musicians did and would talked about way back in like the 40s and 50s and stuff. But it took so long for that to get into academia, and now it's just part of the jazz program, but it's like unheard of in most classical education, right?
Exactly. It's so much about being perfect, pitch perfect, note perfect. The only realm in the classic world that still is about improvisation is the early music.
Right, where you can do a lot of ornamentation.
You can take liberties as a vocalist and as a harpsichord. Everyone can make their own changes. And in fact, I call Baroque music kind of like jazz. There's like a figured bass and everyone kind of plays over it.
Right, and it's so fun. Like I really like doing the Corelli sonatas, the really early ones, like Opus 5 and 6, where you have like two violins and a cello usually, and especially the adagios. There's just like these long whole notes and half notes with these nice sequences and suspensions and stuff, which sound good as they are, but it was actually expected that you would be meandering all around it and creating all this stuff around it.
Yes.
And when you do, once you get used to doing it, and then it's super fun to play,
I think I had some sort of playlist on my phone, and it had Dave Matthews on the one hand, and then also ground bass opera ensembles by Purcell at the same time. I was like, this is actually very, very similar. They're improvising. Purcell's improvising over a ground bass that's been repeated over and over again. Dave Matthews is improvising over a ground bass over and over again. I mean, there's not much difference.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes it really fun too.
It does.
Especially like then, what I like to do in that type of situation is if you're doing something that's for sonata allegro form where there's a repeat, then on the repeat, like the first time through, you play it pretty straight, but then on the repeat, you do all kinds of stuff and add all the ornaments and do whatever you want, change the articulation and everything, so that then there's a reason for having a repeat besides just doing it twice.
Exactly.
So that's one way to breathe new life into classical.
Yes.
So, and it's really fun when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, we have Trish. I found out that organists still have a very strong improvisation tradition.
They do.
To the point of even being able to improvise fugues. I don't know how in the hell they do that, but apparently it's somewhat normal for a good organist to be able to do that. So,
well, they had to because they had to fill time.
Okay.
In the service, for the offertory or at different points of the service that go longer or shorter, they had to improvise.
Yeah. That's cool. See that I'll have to say now, I'm going to go back to when I was an undergrad at the UW. I was in that same mindset where classical music was just how to play it. It was all technique and how to play with feeling and play really technically well. But it's all within that box until I took a jazz class because I was required to. As part of my degree, I was required to take at least one jazz class with Roy Cummings. And then I started listening to Oscar Peterson and some of these other amazing pianists. And it was like, whoa, I mean, this is like completely a totally different world where suddenly the musician is creating the stuff on the spot. And it was like so freeing, actually. I was like, I suddenly felt like I just had new life, And so
there's so many talented people in the music world, but it's under the guise of an audition all the time. How well you can play something, how pitch perfect you can be. But these auditions that are the entryway into a job like this or into an orchestra, it doesn't tell you like what kind of person you are, what kind of ideas you have, how well you work with other people. Mm-hmm. Those things are about as important as it is how pitch perfect, a Tchaikovsky violin concerto is.
Yeah. Plus also, I mean, whenever you do recording nowadays, you can put so many million splices in and nobody will ever know as long as you're good at it.
Right.
Because with a computer now, I mean, you can make super tight splices that you could never do with a reel-to-reel tape like in the old days.
Yes. So, I'm working on that right now. I'm trying to play both piano parts of Hallelujah Junction by John Adams.
Oh, cool.
I recorded them both, and now I'm trying to put them on top of each other. And I had a metronome in my head, in my earbud. It's not
hard, right?
It's hard.
Yeah.
Very hard.
Okay, so now we're in a different realm. Okay, so in that kind of situation, I find myself sometimes I'll just do a halfway decent take. And then I'm like, you know what? I'll just go edit it, and I've got what I need from this take and that take, and I can put it together. And then sometimes I'll end up spending like 3 hours editing it, and I'm like, you know what? If I would have just redid that again, I could have probably got just as good in 5 minutes of just playing it better the second time through. So it's like then you're like the different parts of your brain and your skill set are sort of competing with each other, and you gotta somehow make the right choice of what's worth more.
Well, I've been laying down so many videos, and then my computer's not keeping up with all the rendering, and then my audio's not linking up with the video. But I see people like Jacob Collier, and he's doing these like very complicated synchronizations with complicated harmonies and dozens and dozens of videos at the same time. Anyway, if he can do it, I can do 2 videos.
Yeah. What editor are you using?
I'm using Final Cut.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a pretty good one.
It is. I'm starting with iMovie, taking one video, and then I'm putting that now into Final Cut and then put them together.
Okay. Yeah. I pretty much use Premiere Pro now. And one thing, of course, is you got to have a really good computer.
You do.
Otherwise, you can drive yourself crazy. Because it's when it's trying to pre-render it, if it's all choppy, you never really know.
Exactly.
So you pretty much, what I've found, if you can find a really good like gaming laptop, that'll usually do it for you.
Yes.
But it's worth it to spend the extra money if you're doing video editing. Yeah.
Yes. And then you're shooting in 4K.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I have a GoPro that's shooting at 5.3K now. I mean, we're talking it gets really heavy with the storage.
Yeah. Okay, that's a whole nother discussion.
Yes.
We probably shouldn't go there. But yeah. Well, okay, so this is another thing. So now it's very common for a musician to be a jack of all trades, where like you're a musician, plus if you're a YouTuber, then you got to know all about video editing, and then also audio editing, how to make splices. All those are really useful and almost necessary skills now if you want to be a soloist type of musician, right?
And no one teaches it because I mean, you just kind of have to play around on your phone or play around with your computer. Also graphic design as well, create, beautiful graphics that pop. Those are all things that we don't learn in school, at music school. You just figure it out on your own.
I mean, you can learn it. Oh, well, if you're resourceful, nowadays you learn it by watching YouTube videos on how to do it.
Yes. And there's so many tutorials out there.
Yeah. That are very good.
Very good.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, there's another question. Like, where do you think academia is going now? Like, how is it going to evolve into this new way of doing this stuff?
I mean, I'm coming from a public institution that used to enjoy quite a bit of support from the state, and that's gone down over the years since '08 crash and now pandemic. I think these public institutions are becoming more businesses now, and that's the reason when I was an administrator, it was all about numbers. So I think, there used to be a time where it was in an intellectual playground. You went to a school because you wanted to think, and you wanted to be a philosopher at this school, you wanted to be a musician at this school, you wanted to be an artist at this school, or a historian or a lawyer at this school. And now I think universities have become more mini-opolises, where it's not just the classroom, but it's like the recreation center, it's the dormitory, it's the facilities, it's creating as much of a home, an attractive home for these students, that it is just the professors themselves. So there's that part. And then the value of the degree itself, I think, has gone down actually over the years. Is a bachelor's degree going to equal a job? Is a master's degree going to automatically equal a job? I think that's a question mark.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so many topics. Wow. So do you like, I mean, it was a life experience for 2 years thinking like that, but I'm gathering since you're not doing it now, it wasn't necessarily that enjoyable.
No, it wasn't. And I was doing it at the same time as directing the orchestra, so I still was teaching. I couldn't look at the university in that way as a business. I really wanted to connect to students. I wanted to see the students' story, where they were coming from and what their needs were and how we can progress them. That was not the story being told at the administrative level. It was, how many people can we fit into a classroom?
For how much money?
For how much money? How many students can this faculty member handle before they're diminishing returns on the progress of their students? How good can our football team be so that we can be an attractive place because we're a winning athletics institution? Those kind of things.
Okay. Yeah.
Very, very, very hard. Very hard to stomach when, you want to be a great artist. At the same time, I will say some of those lessons about business we can still take into the arts realm.
Yeah. Yep.
Because music is expensive, and I think musicians in particular have done a great job of devaluing their art. I'll play your wedding for $25, or I'll teach you a lesson for free, or I don't think we should do that anymore. You can come to our orchestra for a voucher, see our orchestra perform for a voucher. I don't think we should do that. I think we should keep our prices commensurate with the expertise and the training it took to get to that level.
Wow. Okay.
For example, a doctor, if you have something that comes up over the weekend and you want your doctor to come check you out, the doctor's not going to do that.
Right.
The lawyers.
Well, I'll see. I can fit you in on Tuesday, 3 weeks from now.
Right.
Unless you're going to die. Otherwise, if you're going to die, go to the emergency room.
Exactly.
And I'll take care of you. And
regularly here at CWU, hey, I need an extra lesson this weekend. Hey, I have a recital coming up. Can you accompany? Sure. Everyone drops everything for everybody. And I think we should treat ourselves a little bit better that way. Draw a little bit more lines on how we balance our time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because I'm almost in the opposite frame of mind, where I'm always trying to help people as best I can. But of course, the first thing comes out of my mouth is, sure, I can do it as long as it fits my schedule and we can figure out a slot.
Yes.
So I guess I don't feel guilty about saying, well, this is the framework we got to put it in. It's just the way it is.
Right.
Thank God for Google Calendar. It's way easier to do it now with that than it used to be with just writing it in your book and then screwing up all the time and double booking stuff. I'm like, oh no.
Yes. But I understand that. I understand that mentality too, because you're doing that gratis, that volunteer for the sake of a bigger cause. I'm doing this for this performance. I'm doing this for my friend. I'm doing this for the sake of this composition being realized.
Right. Also, the idea is that if I'm putting out good and helping people as much as I can, at some point they're going to help me. So we're all going to benefit. Right.
Yes.
So that's, of course, the big caveat, the big difference is that I have a day job. So I'm a computer guy during the day. So that's where I get my money. And then this other stuff, since I'm not really making any money off it, is technically a hobby. So I can afford to do that as long as I can figure out how to find the time to do it. But if I was surviving off that, of course, then it would be a lot different deal, right?
Yeah, I think in the short run, great, because you're spreading positive karma. In the long run, if you don't see those positive returns over the long run, it becomes a source of frustration. And
it's almost the exact same thing that Mozart went through.
Totally.
Remember in his letters, he was like, oh, we're going to see such and such a duke. We're going to play for him. And then, he loved how I played. And then he gave me this stupid watch. When what I wanted to do was get a job at his court. You hear that one happen quite a bit in Mozart's letters, Yes. So it's almost like nothing's changed after 300 years.
Well, he was a slave or an indentured servant. So I don't know if I want to work in that way. Things have kind of changed in terms of class distinction.
Yeah, that's true. Wow. Okay, well, we probably should wrap it up, or we're just going to ramble forever about all this stuff. But is there anything you want to say, any parting remarks or concerts coming up that we want to put in the description of the video or anything like that? Or?
I just want to say thanks to all your followers for checking this out, and hope they can follow Lake Union Civic Orchestra in our next season. And maybe you're in the Wenatchee area, check out Wenatchee Valley Symphony Orchestra. What we're doing this season, lots of great music. And if you have a kid that's interested in studying music, come to Central Washington University.
Yep, in Ellensburg. Yeah. And then, of course, also Nick's website, which is very beautiful and has lots of information on it. We'll put down there, and you click on the link and go to Nick's website and carry on.
Had a great time.
All right, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, we never even got to talk about Star Trek. Oh, wow. So Nick, by the way, is a Trekkie.
Yeah.
So, among other things. So, well, at least we can do the Spock salute here. Live long and prosper, sir. And I'm looking forward to our first rehearsal on Lugo in a couple weeks.
Yeah, we'll see you soon.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Fantastic creations emerging spontaneously from the space of life.
For the benefit of all beings everywhere.
We gotta